Hello, everyone. This is part two of the sermon I gave on May 22nd. I really wanted to honor the 25 minutes benchmark, and in hindsight, I'm definitely glad that I ended where I did. This is just continuing to speak on the rest of the passage. It's the second half of Colossians 2. We're looking at verses 16 to 23, and maybe this provides just a little bit of an extra flow, and hopefully you enjoy it on your lovely long weekend. Paul goes on to say, therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. And so, my kind of summary statement for this is Jesus is the reality behind the law, and our fulfillment is found in him. So we had the law, and those are the rules that God had laid out for his liberated people. And it had a time and a place. These laws were supposed to lead a nation of ex-slaves and to healthy patterns, to live as a newly formed kingdom of priests. But the law was never able to change anyone's heart, and it didn't have the power to do that. And Paul says the law is actually a shadow of future things, namely Jesus, as in the way to new life, mistrusting in Christ and his coming kingdom, not in simply acting morally. And the transformation we find in Christ is what we really need. He makes us new, and our new life in him does not need to be supplemented by following the law or any man-made rules we can come up with nowadays. Don't let anyone judge you, Paul says. And it's like he's saying, ignore the criticism. The Colossians certainly would have faced a judgment. Paul says, resist the pressure, forget the condemnation, let not your heart be troubled. Jesus Christ is Lord. He goes on in verse 18 to 19, sort of continuing his argument. Don't let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. Such a person also goes into great detail about what they've seen. They're puffed up with idle notions by their unspiritual mind. They've lost connection with the head, from whom the whole body, supported and held together by its ligaments and sinews, grows as God causes it to grow. And Paul seems to be warning the Colossian people about specific people, or at least specific kinds of people who claim that they've seen special visions or have access to some spiritual secret that only the mystical or intellectual elite can tap into. They claim that this good news of Jesus is not enough for us. So we need something more. So in my words, I say, watch out for spiritual secrets that imply that an ordinary life with Jesus is not enough. I'm reminded again of the religion section of chapters where every other book has some beautiful person's face on it, touting a kind of 1, 2, 3 step do-it-yourself approach to faith. A new method they discovered, a special prayer you can say, a trendy mantra you can put on Twitter. Maybe you have to belong to this certain kind of community, and these authors or these special people seem to be implying that there's only one legitimate spiritual experience, and it's theirs. And if you don't have the same experience, you're missing something. Actually, I see the same thing when I would go into the library. I remember on the right, they'd have sort of a quick read section where you only get to check out the book for like 3 days at a time. And a lot of the quick reads books were these kind of pseudo spiritual books. Again, beautiful person, dressed nicely, a lot of hair, and a false humility about them that those are Paul's words. And I sort of laughed to myself because calling a Christian book a quick read is almost a red flag. You should probably pass on that one. There's no shortcut to spiritual maturity. There's no fast track to the kingdom. It's a hard, long obedience in the same direction, to use Eugene Peterson's phrase. It all starts with, again, saying Jesus Christ is Lord. That is Paul's central message. Lastly, Paul goes on, he finishes with this kind of lengthy piece here. Since you died with Christ to the elemental spiritual forces of this world, why, as though you still belong to the world, do you submit to its rules? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These rules, which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use, are based on merely human commands and teachings. Such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. In Jesus, we now belong to a new world. I mean, it's this world, but it's like the new version of this world. It's a new world that is coming into existence even now as we speak. And if that's the case, if there is a new world and that's the one we belong to, why do we act as if we still belong to the old one of laws and rituals? And so I say to this that rituals don't solve the problem and rules don't change the heart. The old patterns, self-discipline, the rigorous restraint, they just don't fit anymore. Self-discipline can feel like making advances, but it lacks any value in itself, Paul says. Not that, self-discipline is a bad thing. It is a godly thing in many ways, but it's not the point. It's not the way to freedom. And the Colossian people were really saying, this is the point. This is the way to God, self-restraint. Everything we do should not be done for the sake of the thing itself, but because Jesus Christ is Lord. There's a lot to unpack in this one. I'll just summarize it with a quote from William Barclay. He says, freedom comes not from restraining desires by rules, but from the death of evil desires and springing to life of new desires by virtue of Christ being in Christians and Christians being in Christ. And this is we're at the point where I was going to read my that song by John Mark Pantana, but I read it at the end of the first part instead. I would love to chat with these things about you. Thank you for listening to them. Hope you were blessed by it and hope your small group discussions go well. Have a great long weekend.